layers and layers and layers of information are coming out, not just because objects are being examined in detail, but also because new technologies can be applied to them.
Was the mask created for Tutankhamun or for someone else?
Imagine lifting a legend out of the dark and discovering that the face the world worships may not belong to the boy king at all. For a century, Tutankhamun's golden mask has stood as the untouchable icon of ancient Egypt, serene, symmetrical, almost superhuman. Yet the closer scholars look, the less simple that masterpiece appears. Beneath the polished gold lies a story of hurried burial, erased names, damaged repairs, disputed theories, and a modern appetite for mystery so intense that one dramatic phrase, quantum imaging, now threatens to blur the line between archaeology and fantasy. The truth begins not with futuristic machines, but with a tomb opened in 1922. When Howard Carter and his team entered the burial chambers in the Valley of the Kings, they uncovered what seemed like a miracle of survival, a pharaoh's resting place packed with astonishing treasures. Among them was the now famous funerary mask, resting over the head and shoulders of the mummy inside the innermost coffin. Even after all these years, Carter's descriptions and Harry Burton's photographs preserve the awe of that moment. Gold flashed in lamplight. Inlay and stone glowed against darkness. A dead king looked uncannily alive. That mask is not merely beautiful. It is constructed from sheets of high-carat gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli, quartz, obsidian, colored glass, and semi-precious materials arranged with extraordinary precision. The Neme's headdress, the false beard, the broad collar, the calm eyes rimmed in blue, every feature was designed to do sacred work. In Egyptian belief, burial equipment was not decoration in the modern sense. It was active protection. It gave the dead ruler an eternal body, a divine identity, and a face fitted for transformation. The mask was theology hammered into metal. And yet, one detail has long bothered specialists. The ears are pierced. That might sound trivial to modern viewers, but in the context of royal iconography, it matters. Pierced ears appear more commonly on depictions of women and of younger individuals. Tutankhamun did become king as a child, so that feature alone proves nothing. But archaeology is often built from accumulations of discomfort rather than one definitive clue. When a masterpiece contains several small irregularities, experts begin asking a dangerous question. Was this object made exactly for the person it buried? That question gained force through the work of Nicholas Reeves, the British Egyptologist whose arguments about the Amarna period have repeatedly unsettled accepted narratives. Reeves proposed that the mask may originally have been fashioned for another royal figure, perhaps even Neferneferuaten, a ruler many scholars connect with Nefertiti in the chaotic years after Akhenaten. His reasoning drew attention not just to the pierced ears, but to inscriptions, construction differences in parts of the mask, and the wider political crisis surrounding Tutankhamun's unexpected death. If the young king died before his burial equipment was fully prepared, reworking an existing elite object would not have been impossible. In ancient Egypt, urgency could reshape ritual. This is where modern storytelling often rushes toward melodrama. Online videos announce hidden scans, forbidden discoveries, and technological revelations that supposedly overturned all of Egyptology overnight. One of the most viral claims centers on so-called quantum imaging, described as a revolutionary scan that exposed another royal name beneath Tutankhamun's own. It sounds irresistible. Gold remembers pressure. Atoms confess history. A machine sees what human eyes never could. The problem is that no credible published archaeological record supports the dramatic version of that story, and no recognized Egyptological authority has confirmed a sensational quantum breakthrough on the mask. That does not mean the mask has never been scientifically examined. It has. Researchers have studied ancient Egyptian metals, construction methods, joins, inlays, and manufacturing traces through accepted analytical techniques. Conservators and specialists have also closely examined the mask during one of the most embarrassing modern episodes in museum history. In 2014, workers at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo accidentally damaged the false beard and reattached it hastily with epoxy. The repair left visible residue and public outrage. What followed was a meticulous conservation campaign led by the German conservator Christian Ekman, whose team worked to remove the inappropriate adhesive and restore the object with proper methods. That real story is dramatic enough without imaginary physics. During such moments of conservation, objects often reveal details that routine display keeps hidden. Joints, soldering lines, stress points, and old interventions become easier to inspect. Tutankhamun's mask already carried long-standing scholarly interest because some of its features suggest stages of manufacture not entirely uniform across the whole piece. Even before internet culture began attaching science fiction vocabulary to the artifact, experts had debated whether the face, ears, inscriptions, and metal composition might preserve traces of adaptation. The central issue was never magic technology. It was whether careful observation, epigraphy, and technical analysis point toward reuse. Reuse in ancient Egypt should not be imagined as crude theft from a tomb in the night. It could be practical, ceremonial, and politically motivated. The late 18th dynasty was unstable. Akhenaten's religious revolution had shattered long-held traditions. Court identities shifted. Names were erased. Monuments were reinscribed. Royal images were recut to suit new regimes. Tutankhamun himself changed his name from Tutankhaten, reflecting the wider reversal of the Aten experiment and the restoration of Ammonius' cult. In such a world, the recycling of elite funerary equipment would not be an outlandish scandal. It would be part of a broader culture of repair, revision, and ideological survival. To understand why that possibility matters, it helps to remember how abruptly Tutankhamun disappeared. He died around the age of 19, leaving no long adult reign, no monumental building program on the scale of Ramesses, no fully settled legacy. The burial that followed appears rich beyond imagination, but richness is not the same as preparation. Some scholars have long suspected that elements of his funerary assemblage show evidence of adaptation, compromise, and speed. The tomb itself is relatively small for a pharaoh. Certain objects may have been repurposed. What looks from a distance like perfection can, at closer range, resemble a brilliant emergency assembled under the pressure of dynastic fear. That fear was not abstract. The Amarna age had torn a wound through Egyptian political and religious life. Akhenaten's break with the old gods destabilized institutions that had anchored royal legitimacy for generations. When Tutankhamun's court tried to restore traditional worship, it was not simply correcting policy. It was attempting to heal a kingdom while erasing embarrassing memory at the same time. That atmosphere makes every altered inscription and every reused image feel more charged. The state was not merely burying a king. It was trying to close a chapter that refused to stay closed. If the mask was adapted, then the identity of its first intended owner becomes the great haunting question. For many viewers, the answer rushes immediately toward Nefertiti, because no figure from ancient Egypt combines elegance, fame, and absence quite like she does. Her painted bust is one of the most recognizable faces in world history, yet her final years remain maddeningly uncertain. Did she disappear before Tutankhamun's reign matured, or did she rule in another name? The title Neferneferuaten has become the hinge of that debate. Some scholars connect it to Nefertiti. Others caution that the evidence remains contested and unstable. The mask, if truly repurposed, sits right at the center of that unresolved storm. The attraction of that theory is emotional as much as intellectual. It transforms the mask from a funerary object into a witness. Suddenly the gold is not passive. It becomes a surface carrying traces of succession, anxiety, and perhaps even suppression. If an earlier royal name once lay beneath later cartouches, then the mask would hold a buried argument about who deserved memory and who had to surrender it. Ancient Egypt was never as static as its stone monuments suggest. Power changed hands. Religious symbols were rewritten. Names were cut away. Even the afterlife could become political. This is why the Internet's promise of an instant technological verdict is so seductive. Quantum imaging sounds like the perfect modern oracle. It seems to offer access without damage, revelation without ambiguity, and certainty without years of disciplined scholarship. In viral retellings, the machine does what archaeologists supposedly could not. It pierces the gold, sees erased hieroglyphs, and exposes a conspiracy hidden for 3,000 years. But history is rarely so obedient. Extraordinary claims require records, published methods, named institutions, peer scrutiny, and evidence that other experts can inspect. Without that, the story remains powerful entertainment, not confirmed discovery. What responsible scholarship offers instead is subtler, and to some listeners, more unsettling. It tells us that objects do not have to yield a final answer to become more mysterious. Christian Ekman's restoration work after the Beard accident reminded the world that conservation is itself a form of investigation. To remove modern damage, conservators must confront ancient workmanship. They study joins, thickness, old adhesives, mechanical stresses, and hidden surfaces. Every intervention becomes a conversation between modern hands and ancient craft. The mask emerged from that episode not demystified, but newly vulnerable, newly material, no longer an untouchable icon behind glass but a made thing, with seams, history, and risk. That material reality matters because myths survive by making artifacts seem immortal. They are not. Tutankhamun's mask endured burial, discovery, handling, travel debates, conservation crises, and the endless violence of interpretation. It has been photographed, reproduced, commercialized, and turned into shorthand for Egypt itself. Robert K. Rittner once observed that the modern golden mask has become an icon whose cultural power can exceed historical precision. In other words, the object people think they know is partly a modern creation. The face on posters, museum souvenirs, documentaries, and internet thumbnails is not only an ancient masterpiece. It is also a 20th and 21st century symbol built out of desire. And desire changes the story people want to hear. A calm account of contested epigraphy and funerary reuse competes poorly with a dramatic declaration that hidden scans shocked Egyptology. Yet serious historians do not exist to protect excitement. They exist to protect proportion. Nicholas Reeves's arguments deserve attention because they arise from observation and comparison, not because they flatter sensational instincts. Critics deserve equal attention because skepticism is not cowardice. It is the discipline that keeps wonder from turning into fiction. The real debate is not dull. It is the sound of knowledge resisting the temptation to close too soon. There is another reason the mask continues to provoke such intensity. It looks uncannily complete for a reign that ended so soon. Tutankhamun himself is historically fragile, known more through death than governance. He did not conquer empires or leave a long archive of policy. What survived instead was a burial spectacle so rich that it overwhelmed biography. The mask became stronger than the king. Perhaps that imbalance is why people are drawn to the idea that the face originated elsewhere. It feels almost too monumental for a young ruler whose life ended before history properly settled around him. The theory answers an emotional intuition, even when evidence remains contested. Howard Carter could not have predicted that the object he lifted from a nest of linen and resin would one day be argued over not only in journals and museums, but in algorithm-driven feeds where confidence matters more than proof. Harry Burton's photographs froze the mask in reverent stillness. Modern platforms animate it differently. They surround it with ominous music, glowing scans, and the promise of forbidden truth. The artifact has migrated from tomb to museum to digital theater, and each stage has changed its meaning. In that sense, the story of the mask is also the story of how every era invents the ancient world it most urgently wants. For Victorians and imperial collectors, Egypt offered spectacle and possession. For 20th century museums, it offered prestige and public awe. For contemporary audiences, it offers mystery that can be endlessly refreshed. The object does not change, yet the narrative around it mutates constantly. One decade focuses on Carter, another on Nefertiti, another on conservation failure, another on hidden chambers in the Valley of the Kings. Now the word quantum is recruited because it carries the aura of advanced truth. It sounds undeniable. But in popular culture, scientific vocabulary is often used less to explain than to hypnotize. Even so, the hunger behind that vocabulary is understandable. People sense correctly that Tutankhamun's mask is not exhausted by its fame. The closer one looks, the stranger it becomes. Why do some details appear at odds with expectation? How much of the inscriptional evidence can be reconstructed with confidence? Were certain elements manufactured separately, then integrated? How should pierced ears be interpreted in relation to age, gender, and royal style? Was funerary equipment in this period more fluid than earlier generations assumed? These are not fringe questions. They are precisely the kind of questions that keep archaeology alive. And archaeology, at its best, is an argument against arrogance. It teaches that absence is not emptiness, that damage can reveal, that restoration can mislead as well as rescue, and that one object can carry multiple lives at once.